Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for coming online this morning. Hopefully it is a little bit sunnier where you are. It is very rainy where I am today. But for those of you, I suppose, who don't know me, my name is Crystel Rynne, and I'm the CEO here at HRLocker. Today's webinar, we are going to be talking about applying lean principles to HR processes. So I suppose it's something that I have a personal interest in, and I'd be really happy in the Q&A if anybody has any questions throughout. Please drop them into the section, and please ask me as many questions as possible. I'd love to answer. There's also going to be some kind of practical Excel spreadsheets. We never get away from them at the end that I'm happy to share with everybody. But what I'd really like to go through really is going through, first of all, we're going to spend a bit of time understanding the basic lean methodology. So it's not going to be a full-on Six Sigma lean training method, but we'll go through first of all the lean methodologies, and then talk about looking at the different waste sections in HR processes. So the bits of time waste, I suppose, is usually what we'd look at. And then how we can look at applying lean principles to our HR functions. Aligning these with the sustainable people practices and also your ESGs, and then looking at different funding opportunities that are available as well. So I suppose a lot of the time when people come to us, they look at bringing in digitization into their company and don't think about, I suppose, the processes that you're actually looking to digitize. Usually you're looking at digitization and thinking that that's going to solve the problem of any of the HR issues that you have. So where I would say the opposite, that digitizing any processes is a tool, but you have to focus on your processes first to ensure that they're ready to be digitized. And that's where we really look at the lean processes. So from a lean perspective, obviously, it's traditionally done in manufacturing, but really what you're focusing on is looking at efficiencies and effectiveness and focusing on ultimately reducing costs, but looking at minimizing waste. So in HR, most of the processes, when we talk about minimizing waste, it's usually time that we look at. So it's usually kind of that admin function of HR. So hopefully when you go through the processes and you look at I suppose you just analyze them and you focus on how they actually are being run in your company, who's involved in each process. It gives you an understanding of, one, is the process ready to be digitized? And two, is there areas that we can look at that we can optimize, maybe by putting in a digital tool or actually just by reviewing something. Sometimes we tend to get used to doing things a certain way. I always say a really good example is in our own company, HRLocker, we used to have 4 people approving invoices, just because that's the way we always did it, until somebody asked, why do we do it that way? And we were like, well, it's because we always do it that way. So sometimes it's also good for somebody else to have a look at it and go, well, why do you do it that way? Because there isn't actually a reason and you're really just overdoing things. So that's really what we're going to spend a bit of time on today. So very brief overview of lean. I will try to simplify it. So obviously, it comes from specifically from the Toyota manufacturing production line, I suppose around the mid-20th century. And a lot of the manufacturing companies take it on and they look at the processes in terms of their operational lines and start to focus on, well, who's doing what jobs and how long does it take to walk from A to B and can we reduce the waste? The 3 key principles where we look at is value stream mapping. So that's the bit we're going to spend a good bit of time on today in terms of looking at all your processes and mapping the value in each area that you have. The next is the waste reduction, which if you look at the actual lean term is MUDA, but we will just use the layman's term today of waste reduction. And when we look in HR, like I said, it's more than likely waste reduction. It's being that admin task. And then what's a really important part of lean is the Kaizen side of it, which is your continuous improvement. So we put in processes, we change them, and then it's important to understand, well, what is your continuous improvement? Because things can always improve. There could be there could be changes or new technologies that are coming. So it's important to put in that continuous improvement into each process that we have. That could just be a review, for example. Okay, I'm just seeing that this is. So I'm just going to give you an example of a value stream map. So what I would typically do in regards to the value stream mapping is I would go into a company and say, okay, let's start looking at all your HR processes, and we're going to start to map them all out. So I'll give an example. So these are all the specific from a lean perspective is the areas that you need to look at in terms of most of the time in HR, your customers, either your employees or your candidates. Your suppliers could be, if we look at perhaps from a recruitment perspective, there could be job boards or recruitment agencies. Your information flow. So where do we get all the information from? The material flow. Are there any physical elements, or are you still printing out the CVs? That's a physical element. Value added and non-value added activities. So the bit that we're really going to concentrate today are the non-value added activities. So in this whole process, for example, in recruitment, what are the non-value added activities that we do that don't actually add any value to the process, but they're just something that we've always done? Then there's the two different areas that we're going to look at, which is the lead time and the cycle time. So the lead time is how long it takes to complete the process, and the cycle time is it's a little bit different. It's actually the time it takes to fill in each section of it. Okay, so we'll calculate the lead time and the cycle time. The area that we're going to look at is we're going to look at the recruitment process. Okay, so so this is before your improvement. So what we would come into, and I'm just going to show you this very exciting spreadsheet. Oh, 1 second. Where we go back to very old-fashioned spreadsheet, and oh, that's not the right one. My apologies, is the wrong one open. And that's the wrong one again. Sorry. Never do live demos. So when we look at your VSM, which is your value stream mapping, okay, we take recruitment and we look at each of the processes, each of the steps in the process. Then we look at each of the lead time. So how long does it take to actually do them? How long does it take in terms of the actual cycle, the value add activities, and the non-value added activities? So we're just going to go back here to one I've done previously. Okay, so if we look at the recruitment process, so we'd go in and just look at a process before making any judgments, really just focus on what does the process look like. So that's where we're starting from first. So we'll look at first from a recruitment perspective, who's involved, who's the customer. So I put in here hiring managers. So probably as well as who's involved in the process would also be your candidates, any recruitment agencies that you're using. Sorry, not there would be the suppliers. So your suppliers would be job boards and recruitment agencies. Then your information flow. So what do you use to get information? So we have lots of job descriptions, we get applications through, we have interview notes, perhaps you have application forms, perhaps you have tests that people have to do. So how do we get information from people? What are the different things in this process that we use to get information? The material flow. So do we have any physical things? So perhaps from a material perspective, you're getting resumes posted to you, or perhaps you're printing out CVs, things like that. Okay. The value added. So things that actually add value to this process. So from a HR perspective, so writing job descriptions, so they add value to the process because we need them. They'll get information for us. So a good job description adds value to the process. The screening of resumes has to be done. That adds value to the process. We can't take it out. Interviewing of candidates, obviously, also adds value to the candidates. I would put a caveat there that it depends on how many interviews you do. Do they all add value? But we'll come back to that. Making the hiring decision. So it could be some kind of meeting that you have in terms of informally or formally around the hiring decision. That adds value. And onboarding as well has a significant value. So all those things have to be done, and as part of the process, they add value to the process. Things that don't add value, so when we look at these are time wasters, is the reposting of job descriptions. So we have this a lot that perhaps for every single job you write a brand new job description, that you don't have a template or you don't have a specific way of doing job descriptions, as well as that you might use 10 different job boards that you have to manually go into each job board and post the job description each time. So I suppose you'd have to think about, do you actually need all those job boards? But it is a physical activity that somebody has to go and manually do. Waiting for approvals of job descriptions. So if I need, for example, the hiring manager to approve the job description, me waiting for the time that I spend waiting for the hiring manager to approve that isn't adding any value. So maybe I spend 3 days waiting for that person to approve that. So that time is just wasted, basically. Schedule interviews back to back. So, for example, it could be that you're, sorry, distracted with the question. Yes, I will be sharing the slides after, Nikki. Sorry. So, perhaps from if you're just going back and forth to people, rescheduling things, that is it actually really adding value? And lack of clear interview criteria. So, for example, if you don't have a proper structure in terms of the interview notes, then if you've just got unstructured interviews, they're not actually adding value to the process. Okay, so all these things are, you would go through each of your processes and look at what do we do. And it's important, I think, that you get the people who are actually doing the process to be able to fill this out, because sometimes we don't know the things that people are actually doing. So if you go to the person who is in charge of recruitment in your company to say, can you please go through from the time that you get a job, that I come to you and say, we're going to hire this person, what are all the steps that you take? Be very specific in terms of even the small steps. What are all the steps that you have to take to get this job up and somebody hired? So list down all those processes and let's see, are all these steps actually worth it? Are any of them actually adding value? And especially if you're going to be digitizing, when we come in and we bring this processes in place, let's have a look and see, can we either get rid of some of these steps or can we automate them? Okay. So in terms of the lead time, so this whole thing takes 60 days, but in terms of the cycle time, it actually really only is 20 days of work. But maybe because of waiting and things like that, that's why the lead time and the cycle times are over. So I put in the amount of days. So in terms of onboarding, it would usually kind of take around 10 days, hiring decision 3, you'll do each one of those, okay? And the lead time, that's the important bit here, is it's not the amount of time that it takes you to do the work, it's the amount of time that it takes it to be completed. So for example, the job description might take 2 days here, but it's because I've got to get it approved by somebody else, and it might take a day for that person to come back and approve. So it's not that it takes me physically 2 days to write the job description, okay? Again, if you have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A, and I'll stop talking at any stage. So once we've gone through all that, now we start looking at the value added and the non-value added activities, which specifically is your waste area. So I won't bore you too much, but there are specific areas from a lean perspective that we look at in terms of when we're talking about waste. So transportation, motion, waiting, inventory, over processing, defects. Don't worry, there's no test at the end. So transportation if we try to apply this to a recruitment side of things. So transportation is physically transporting things. So consider, so if you have a paper-based system, for example, if you're in a big office and my job as one of HR or the HR manager or the person who's getting things ready, I need to print off all the CVs, and I physically have to bring them to office down the corridor to go and give them to somebody to be prepared for the interview. So that's your physical side of things. Motion. So in terms of, I suppose, the effort that you're doing. So we spend a lot of time looking through, perhaps if you get a lot of unqualified candidates, and we spend a lot of time screening them. So that's a lot of job, like it's a lot of work that has to be done. Perhaps that, I'm going 2 steps ahead, but perhaps that we can think of all the reasons why that would happen. We don't have a pre-screening qualification. Maybe the job description is written badly, things like that, that we're not expressly saying these are the things that we require you to have for this job. Okay. Waiting. So in HR, I think that, and I'd love to get your own feedback, in HR, waiting is often the biggest thing that we can't control. And that's because we work with other people. So we need to get the hiring managers' feedback on the job description. We need to get perhaps finance to sign off on salaries, things like that. So we spend a lot of time waiting. And as well as that, from a candidate perspective, perhaps we're waiting on the candidate to come back to us, or they can't do an interview on Wednesday, it's Friday. So we spend a lot of time going back and forth with that. And perhaps we can look at more defined interview process. Excuse me. So from an inventory perspective, what would that mean from a recruitment perspective? Again, it's looking at the unqualified kind of resumes. So we just have so much stuff. Over processing. So I think that's a good example. What I showed earlier was sometimes 3 or 4 people have to approve something. But in reality, why do we actually need to get 3 or 4 people? Maybe we only need to get 2. So again, in HR, it is an area that I think we fall into, that there is that over processing element as well, where we need to get 3 or 4 people to sign off on something. So we need to kind of, I suppose, look at who ultimately is responsible, and should we be who actually needs to be involved in this decision making. And I think this is often overlooked. So defects. So, hiring the wrong candidate can be very detrimental to a company, and cost is huge. So we don't want to get there. So in terms of defects, you'll have to go through it all again. The waste associated with that is huge. Okay. So how do we solve it all? Okay, so now that we've value stream map and we've identified our muja, our waste, we're going to, I suppose, look at fixing all the things that are going wrong. So first of all, we start and we kind of look at all the defect. We kind of look at the process and we align them to defects, over processing, and inventory and things like that. Okay. So if we look at I don't think I need to explain the benefits, but in terms of when we start off as a project, we're going to say, okay, benefits of streamlining this process are we're going to reduce time to fill vacancies, we're going to have improved quality of hire, we're going to have candidates be happy with the experience, and we're going to lower our recruitment costs. So that's how you're going to get your team involved. We're going to say we're going to review the candidate process, and we're going to look at the end that these are the benefits that we're going to have. Okay. So obviously in the game I'm in, I'm saying, you shouldn't be manually posting job descriptions on all the different job boards. Perhaps you can look at an applicant tracking system that you can, with one click of a button, put it out to 10 different job boards. And that eliminates maybe 5 or 6 hours of work just by automating something, if that is something that we look at. Okay. That will also fix, obviously, at then the transportation of, maybe you might decide, okay, so you know what, we are going to eliminate all physical CVs. Everything's going to be on the server, whether that's in SharePoint perhaps, or it could be an ATS, whichever is easier. But we're going to eliminate, we're going to stop printing off. So that's going to get rid of the transportation side of things. One of the areas perhaps that you've seen is from an interview process that the hiring managers don't really know what questions to ask. Screening, we're not really sure what questions the hiring managers want us to ask. So we're going to put in an actual structured interview process with, for example, we're going to decide what questions we are going to be used for screening, and we are going to have perhaps interview packs ready for the hiring managers, that they're actually all asking the same questions. So then at the end of it, we've got our short list of candidates, everybody's been through the same process, and we're able to compare them really easily. Okay, so that's your structure part of things. We're going to eliminate waste with that. So the batch interview scheduling. So for example, maybe we can look at automating that process, that we're interview scheduling with 10 people rather than having to go back and forth loads with people. And I think if, specifically from a recruitment perspective, if we look at automating pre-screen stages, like that's a huge thing for a lot of companies, and that's where automation can really come in. But make sure that first of all, from your job description perspective, that you're telling people specifically what the minimum requirements are. And if that doesn't get rid of people to stop applying for the job, then you have your pre-screening form that basically, do they have 5 years experience in this? Do they have these certifications? Have they got this specific background? And if they ask no, that automatically disqualifies them. And that starts to give you back a lot of time. So obviously we've gone through all of this, and this is where we want to get to. Okay, so we've identified the waste, and these are the actions that we're going to take to try to bring it back. Okay, I'm gonna yes, I'll do this bit and we'll go there. Then the next bit then, and this is the hard bit really, is you think you've done all that work from a process perspective. We want to get into the continuous improvement side of things. So it is so you've looked at improving your process, but now you want to focus on did it actually work? Okay, so we look back, we review the value stream map. We have a talk to the stakeholders, and that's the hiring managers and the HR admins, perhaps, to say, how's the new process going? Has it worked? Do you find that it's improved your process? If you've implemented a new piece of tech, how's that going? Has it actually improved the process or not? And if it was a pilot thing, for example, perhaps you can now decide whether you're going to implement it across other areas as well. And I think a key thing here is to celebrate your successes. So even if you've reduced recruitment time by 25%, that's a huge win, and make sure that you're talking about it and celebrating with people. I think the really important thing from a Kaizen perspective or a continuous improvement perspective is that you are going back, seeing if it's working. If it's not working, don't be afraid to change it again and keep pivoting and see. Now, obviously, give it enough time to see, why isn't it working? Is it because people aren't following the process? Was the process no good? Was the tech not good enough? Why hasn't it worked? And see, because maybe it was a sound idea. So go back and continuously see is it going to work or not. So that's really important. So when we go into a company, what I like to do is we start with the very first template that I will share with everybody at the end. Okay, so when we start a lean project with companies, you've got to make sure that you're getting buy-in and understanding what the purpose of the actual project is. So from this perspective, we want to talk about what the actual goals and objectives are in looking at your HR processes. So is it about speeding up of recruitment processes, making sure that you're on board? And that's important, that you're talking to stakeholders within the process, but also from a HR manager or C-suite perspective, that you're able to communicate that up to explain this is the reason why we're putting this lean process into HR, because we're looking at, these are our goals and these are objectives. Metrics for success. How will we measure it? So we're going to measure it by reducing our time to hire, making sure that we're ISO compliant, whatever it is. What is the metrics for success here? And the risks and challenges, 99% of the time is people and it's time. So obviously everybody has their day jobs. You're trying to get them to change things and go through the different processes, and you're trying to get them to adapt. So it is around time and it's around buy-in of people. 90% of the time is the risk and challenges. What I like to do is get everybody to list all their HR processes here and a very brief description. And then once we list 50 different HR processes here, people have a little bit of a shock and say they're never going to be able to do all these processes, which we say that's fine. Let's look at one or two first. So let's look at the two main ones that we're going to look at and see, can we get into the habit of reviewing these? And that's where we look at the action plan. So we look at the action plan. The first one that we're going to look at perhaps is the recruitment process. And the second one we're going to look at is the onboarding process. So what's the process improvement? So what are we going to improve? What's the action type? This is where we get a little bit into lean methodology side of it. And again, you need to adapt this to your own company. So if you don't want to use the lean terminology, you don't have to. So from a lean perspective, you can say, okay, so a project, if it's just do it. Basically, you don't have to think about it, just change it right now. It's a Kaizen event, so that's a continuous improvement. An A3 project, so that's a bigger event. So you need to get a couple of people involved in that. And that's, for example, if you're putting in a HRIS system, that's not something you're just going to go off and do. You're probably going to have a couple of people involved in that process. What's the business driver? Is it reputational? So, improving your recruitment process can be reputational. It could be if you've had a bad reputation and people aren't applying for jobs, maybe you need to improve it. Financial. So again, perhaps if you're losing, people are only staying 6 months, so it's a financial objective. Regulatory, a good example from a GDPR perspective is where your HR records actually stored, or recruitment documentation stored. So maybe you want to look at the regulatory side of things or operational. What are the impacts? And who is involved? And that's really, really important, is who's involved. We need to decide who's going to be involved in this project with us. And you need to communicate that John, Jack, and Jill are involved in this process with us. What are the next steps and the target completion date? So I like to start with this to be very planned up front first, to make sure that everybody understands that this is a real serious project that we're going into. There are deadlines in place, there are owners involved, and we're going to go through this as a company and keep reiterating until we get an effective system in place. And I think that's really important before you look at any digitization project, is looking at your different processes and where you can automate. Okay. And then, so once we have this lovely spreadsheet done, we start to look at our processes, our value stream mapping. So this all looks a little bit daunting, but I suppose it is step-by-step process. Okay. So we look first at our value stream. So these are our VSM. So we would put all our processes here. So I would typically give this to the person who's in charge of the recruitment process and get them to write all the steps out here, tell them how many, fill in their lead time and cycle time, put in their value added and non-value added. Okay. We do that for the two processes that we've chosen for this. Okay. Then we look at our waste. Okay, so we look at it perhaps being in your recruitment side of things. So put the again, get the person to put in where they think they're wasting time. Okay, and the process improvements. So which process? So again, that'll be your recruitment. What steps are we going to take? To what step is it? So perhaps scheduling interviews. Before improvement, maybe this takes 6 days. Improvement action, we're going to put a calendar in place so that people can schedule their own interviews. And after improvement now takes 3 days. And who's the responsible person is Jane. Result, good, negative, has it worked, has it not worked? Okay. And then your Kaizen event planning. So again, it's focusing on your timeline in terms of you're going to let it run for 6 months, and then we're going to come back and review it in 6 months and see did it work. And what are the steps involved in it? And again, who is actually involved in that? Please, anybody, any questions on that? Because I think I've gone through it quite quickly. There's two here is, so first of all, ideally, how many people should be involved in the interview process at stage one? So what I would say, and I'm not going to answer your question, I think satisfactorily, is that it does depend on the job. So say, for example, if we are hiring grads here, I'm happy that there's one person that the HR person does that. We don't need to have as many people involved, and that it's more of a screening process. So if we look at screening, I'm always happy that there's one person involved in that. And then at the interview process, in terms of stage one, that it's an actual interview, I would like that there's somebody from HR and the hiring managers involved. So there's two people involved at that stage. And then depending on how many rounds you go after that, but I would prefer that there is always the hiring manager involved and somebody from HR. But I do think it's a personal preference as well. I do like the idea that there's always two people present. Will the slides be sent out afterwards? Yes, and I will also spam you with all the Excel spreadsheets as well. And feel free to ask any questions around any help with that. Okay. So if we just go back here to my lovely slides. Okay. So obviously I've completely convinced you all now to focus on the lean side of things and implement them. So in terms of your process efficiencies, that's the bit that you're looking at, that so that you know before you start to automate things that you focused on how you can improve efficiencies and how you can look at all the areas and you know that the process works really well. And if you take nothing from me today other than one thing to say that if a process is bad, automating is not going to fix it. So make sure that your process is good before you start to automate it. And that's what you'll get after it. Okay. So I'll share these with you afterwards, but two good examples are from IBM and Chevron, and they go through, if you want to look at them yourselves, they do go through case studies in terms of how they implemented lean into their own HR processes. And one focused on recruitment, they were able to reduce fill vacancies, time to fill vacancies reduced by 25%. And then Chevron, in terms of productivity, raised 30%. And I do think that that's a really good example from a lean perspective, is focusing on the productivity from HR. I'm like a broken record saying that in terms of, HR can be so admin heavy that it's important that we kind of try to alleviate some of that so that people can actually focus on doing what they're supposed to do, which is focus on the people side of things. Okay, so I just have a question here before I go on to sustainable people. So if you are to automate a process, are you of the view that the process should be redesigned to match the tech with minimal customization, or where do you stand on that? I think that most tech is designed for best practice. So if your process doesn't align the tech process, you probably need to ask yourself, why doesn't it? Are you doing something in a weird and wonderful way that doesn't need to be done that way? So I think that if you have very, very distinct processes that do not match your typical SaaS product, you're probably going to have to look at bespoke software. And that is a monetary decision for you to make, because it's going to cost you probably 10 times the cost of just buying an off-the-shelf product. So what I would suggest is seeing, can you fit it into whatever SaaS product that you're looking to buy. For example, we use HubSpot here from a CRM perspective, and we've had to adapt some of our support and our marketing to fit in with what it can do, because they are doing it in a best practice way, in a secure GDPR best practice way. And it would, the cost of going into a bespoke software outweighs the advantage, I suppose, of not changing the process a small bit. So what I would say is, if you cannot find a piece of tech to which would more than likely be a SaaS product to match your process, you need to look at, are you doing the process in the best way? Would be my answer to that. And also push back on the tech, the piece of tech that you're looking at as well, to understand why they don't do it in the way that you're doing it. Because obviously most companies would have hundreds of companies doing it one specific way. So if you're doing it a different way, I suppose look at why you are doing it a different way to other people. I hope that answers your question. Okay. So when we start to look at the different processes from a HR perspective, I think it's a good idea then to start to focus on how you can map them to your sustainable people practices, which is around your SDGs and your ESGs, which is your environmental social goals and your sustainable development goals. So how do you, if you're looking at doing any of your sustainability reporting, is how do you take your HR piece and actually how does it map into the S bit in your ESG? And that'll get you quite a lot of the way there in terms of if you are doing any of your CSRD reporting or your VSME reporting. So you can look at in terms of the actual social impact. I'm going to give you an example here. So if we look at streamlining your recruitment, so what in terms of if you're in the CIPD side of things from a HR perspective, you can look at what framework, what pillar this sits at, what's the social impact. So it's going to improve your candidate experience, the environmental impact. So perhaps you're going to be looking at that you're going to eliminate paper and eliminate waste element from, you're going to go I suppose paperless. So that's one element of it. Perhaps from a ATS perspective, you've picked a low energy product, and the potential economic impact is it's going to reduce the hiring cost, and it's also going to increase productivity, because obviously if people aren't doing all that waste element of it, you're going to increase productivity. And what does it align with? So it aligns with your SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and because you're investing in people's better jobs basically, and your SDG 12, which is your responsible consumption and production. So, but I am happy to have a totally different conversation with people on that. I do think if you're in the sustainability side of things at the moment, in terms of you're looking at doing your own reporting, HR is a really good way to start to see what actual policies and practices that you're currently doing and how to align them back into your ESGs and your SDGs, because actually there's quite a lot that you probably are doing from a HR perspective that are already aligned with those good practices that you're doing. So, funding opportunities. So in terms of if you're looking at specifically your HR processes, and you either want to digitize or improve them through a lean element. If you are an Enterprise Ireland client, there is funding for that up to 80%. I think it's around €5,000 that you can go and go to Enterprise Ireland, and if you are a client, and say that you're looking at either digitizing perhaps HR or digital, or wanting to improve your processes. These two different routes that you can go through, and it gives you 7 days for somebody to come in and focus on your processes and basically go through what I've just gone through from a spreadsheet perspective. There is go through each one of your processes, identify the waste, see how we can improve that process, and see how we can automate it as well. And there's funding there for people if anybody wants to contact me directly and talk to me about that. So that is my whistle stop tour on lean but identifying, I suppose, waste in your processes and what you can get from, I suppose, the importance of focusing on streamlining your processes before you start to automate or digitize. And lean is a good framework to do that. And I suppose lean does come with lots of different acronyms and topics and specific way of doing things. But if you, I suppose, really what I want you to get across is that bringing in a piece of automating a process that isn't working isn't going to fix the process. You need to fix the process and identify what the issues are first before you bring in automation or digitization. So thank you, everybody. Please, as usual, we will send out the recording and all my lovely spreadsheets as well. And if you have any questions specifically about grant aid or even just about how to get started yourselves, I'll be more than delighted to answer any questions that you have and go through the process that we've gone through, or go through how we go through it with customers as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Hope that was helpful to everybody. And again, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or if you have my email address, please drop me an email. I'll be happy to chat to anybody. So thank you so much, everybody, and take care.